I wanted to find out your name and come over and tell you that you should be in movies, but you left before I had a chance.
Bill Holden was ready to risk everything for Audrey Hepburn. His marriage, his reputation, even his career. And for a moment, it looked like she was ready to do the same. But just as their secret affair was about to turn into something real, Hepburn asked for the one thing she had always dreamed of: children. That's when Holden revealed the disturbing truth he'd been hiding. He told her it was the one thing he would never give her. The reason why shattered her instantly and left him carrying a regret he would never outrun. The affair that should not have happened. In the fall of 1953, two of the most beautiful people in the world walked onto a Hollywood backlot to make a movie called Sabrina. She was 24 years old, a fresh face from Europe who had just won the world's heart with a movie about a runaway princess. He was 44 years old, an Oscar-winning star with a wife and 3 children waiting for him at home. The movie was supposed to be a romantic comedy about a chauffeur's daughter who falls in love with 2 brothers. But what happened behind the cameras was not a comedy at all. It was an affair that would leave both of them wounded in ways they never fully recovered from. The movie was Sabrina, directed by Billy Wilder, who had a reputation for making sharp, smart films about complicated people. Holden was already a huge star by then. He had just won the Academy Award for Best Actor for his role in Stalag 17, a prison camp drama that showed he could do more than just look handsome on screen. He had been married to a woman named Ardis, who performed under the stage name Brenda Marshall since 1941, and they had 3 children together. By all appearances, he was a family man who had everything figured out. Audrey Hepburn was the opposite of settled. She had just finished Roman Holiday earlier in 1953, and that film had made her famous almost overnight. But she was still climbing the industry ladder, unsure of where her career would go. She was also still recovering from an unpleasant breakup with a British industrialist named James Hansen. She had called off their engagement, and the parting had been difficult. When she arrived in Los Angeles to shoot Sabrina, she was alone, vulnerable, and far from home. The city welcomed her warmly. She became the toast of the dinner party circuit, and a powerful media mogul named Jules Stein threw a party for her at his mansion. People said it was an unheard-of honor for a newcomer, and it told everyone in Hollywood that Audrey Hepburn was someone to watch. Holden became obsessive about meeting her. According to a biographer named Edward, who wrote a book about the relationship, Holden correctly assessed that Hepburn was the kind of woman who wanted the man to make the first move. So he did. He pursued her with the same intensity he brought to his best film performances, and she did not resist for long. Things progressed quickly between them, and what started as a flirtation blossomed into all-out passion. The chemistry they were supposed to create on screen spilled over into the dressing room, and the crew on the set could feel something happening between the 2 stars. Hepburn reportedly told her friends that Holden was the most handsome man she had ever met. She saw him as her guardian angel and described him as a red-blooded American male. This was a strange way to describe Holden, especially because he was actually quite sensitive underneath the movie star surface. Holden, for his part, called Hepburn the love of his life, a phrase he never used about any other woman. He also saw her as his ultimate prima ballerina because she had studied ballet in her youth, and her posture still showed the signs of classical training. There was something about the way she carried herself that reminded him of a dancer, and that grace drove him crazy in the best possible way. What made their connection so intense was not just physical attraction. They shared an emotional intimacy that did not require words. One smile from him was enough to pass a message between the two. After filming each day, Holden would take her out for dinner most evenings or drive her to distant spots where they could walk together without being seen. Those quiet hours away from the studio and the cameras brought them closer together, and soon they fell in love. Both stars worked hard to keep the relationship a secret from the public. Holden knew that a scandal could derail his career, and Hepburn understood that being labeled a homewrecker could destroy the carefully built Cinderella image that made her so beloved. They were careful, but not careful enough. One member of the Sabrina crew once barged into Holden's dressing room without knocking and caught them in an intimate moment. It should have been the end of both their careers, but miraculously, the crew member kept his mouth shut, and the story never reached the tabloids. Billy Wilder, the director, later claimed he did not know about the affair at the time. He said that people on the set told him afterward that Bill and Audrey were having an affair and that everybody knew except for him. Whether that was true or just a convenient way to avoid questions is hard to say. Wilder was known for being sharp and observant, and it seems unlikely that he missed something so obvious, but he stuck to his story, and the world let him keep it. The third star of the film, Humphrey Bogart, was reportedly unaware of the affair as well. But Bogart was a special case. He was hostile on the set of Sabrina because he felt Wilder favored Holden and Hepburn, and he did not enjoy making a romantic comedy after years of playing tough guys in films like The African Queen. He kept to himself, nursed his resentment, and missed what was happening right in front of him. The irony was that the plot of the film, Sabrina, involved a love triangle between Hepburn and two brothers played by Holden and Bogart. In real life, Holden was the center of an actual triangle between Hepburn and his own wife. The parallel was perfect, and Bogart never noticed it. The affair continued through the filming of Sabrina, and although Holden was married, his marriage was not what it appeared to be. Because behind the closed doors of his house, a secret arrangement was already in place, and that arrangement would make the affair with Hepburn both more complicated and more painful than either of them could have imagined. Holden's open marriage to Ardis. By the time William Holden met Audrey Hepburn, he had been married to his wife Ardis for 12 years. On the outside, they looked like a normal Hollywood family. They had 3 children and a beautiful home designed by a famous architect named Paul Williams. But the marriage was not normal at all. Ardis had long learned to look the other way when it came to her husband's affairs. They had a specific agreement. Holden could engage in affairs with other women as long as he came home to her every night. That arrangement had worked for more than a decade, but when Audrey Hepburn walked into the picture, everything fell apart. Holden allegedly had a strange pattern with his mistresses. He would often invite them to meet his wife, and Ardis accepted this as part of their arrangement. She knew who the other women were. She sometimes even had dinner with them. It was a strange way to live, but it worked for them, and Holden had strayed many times before without the marriage breaking. Ardis had learned to tolerate his wandering eye because she knew he would always come back to her at the end of the night. That was the deal, and she trusted him to keep it. Following his usual pattern, Holden allegedly invited Hepburn to meet Ardis at their Hollywood villa. The meeting was supposed to be a formality, a way of showing that this affair was no different from all the others. But Hepburn was different, and Ardis knew it the moment she walked through the door. Hepburn later said that she found Ardis beautiful, and that the role of injured wife did not suit her. Even in that awkward situation, Hepburn held her head high, gave out one of her killer smiles, and said that she was so happy to meet Ardis. The performance was perfect, but the tension underneath was impossible to miss. Ardis sensed immediately that something was different about this affair. She was scared, and she had never been scared before. According to the biographer Edward, Hepburn was a wife's worst nightmare. She was cultured, beautiful, and well-spoken, and she had completely entranced Holden in a way that no other woman ever had. The other mistresses had been passing fancies, temporary distractions. Hepburn was something else entirely, and artists could see that her marriage was in real danger for the first time. According to the biographer Edward, as soon as the front door closed behind Hepburn, everything fell apart. Artists went into attack mode and demanded that Holden stop having an affair with Hepburn. Her voice was clear, and her words were not negotiable. She had tolerated his affairs for 12 years, but she would not tolerate this one. Holden listened to her demand, and then he did something that shocked her. He ignored her completely. He decided to continue seeing Hepburn, and he did not even try to hide it. The affair became bolder after that. Holden promised Hepburn that he would divorce Artis so he could marry her, and he seemed to mean it. He was willing to throw away a 12-year marriage for this woman, and he was willing to risk his career in the process. Had the affair become public, it would have been catastrophic for Hepburn's carefully built Cinderella image. She would have been labeled a homewrecker, and that label would have followed her for the rest of her career. Holden knew this, but he did not seem to care. He was so entranced by Hepburn that he was willing to ignore both his wife's ultimatum and the potential professional fallout. For a man who had spent his entire adult life protecting his reputation, this was a stunning change. Holden had always been careful. He had kept his affairs quiet and his marriage stable. He had never given Artis a reason to doubt that he would come home at night. But Hepburn changed something in him. He stopped being careful. He stopped caring about the consequences. He wanted her, and he was willing to burn down everything he had built to have her. Artis watched her husband slip away from her, and there was nothing she could do to stop it. She had given him an ultimatum, and he had ignored it. She had reminded him of their agreement, and he had broken it. The marriage that had survived 12 years of infidelity was suddenly on the verge of collapse. Not because Holden had cheated, but because he had fallen in love. That was the one thing Artis had never prepared for. She could forgive the affairs, but she could not forgive the love. But there was another obstacle standing between Holden and the future he wanted with Hepburn, and it had nothing to do with Artis or the tabloids or the Hollywood gossip machine. It was something inside Holden himself, a secret he had been carrying for years. And it was the real reason he would never give Hepburn the one thing she wanted most. Why Holden couldn't give Hepburn children. For all the passion and secrecy and stolen nights, the affair between Bill Holden and Audrey Hepburn was always heading toward one question. She wanted to know if they would have a future together. She wanted a home and a family and children running through the halls. He had 3 children already, but when she brought up the topic of having kids of their own, his face changed. An embarrassed smile crossed his lips, and there was something else underneath it. Fear. He had to tell her something that would break her heart, and he had no idea how to say it. Hepburn had always been open about wanting a family. She once said that she could survive without working, but she could not survive without her family. That was why her private life always came first. The reason for this went deep. She had been profoundly wounded as a child when her father abandoned her. He was cold and distant, and eventually left the family entirely, and that loss stayed with her for the rest of her life. It made her insecure about affection and terribly grateful when someone showed her love. She wanted to build the kind of family she never had, and she wanted it badly. She told Holden repeatedly that she wanted 3 or 4 children. She was not just dreaming about it. She was ready to retire from acting altogether if it meant she could be a full-time mother. The fame and the money and the movie sets meant nothing to her compared to the idea of holding her own baby in her arms. After the affair ended, she still called having children a theme in her life, and she talked about wanting lots of babies. This was not a passing wish. This was the central desire of her entire existence. One evening, while Hepburn was chatting brightly about what they would name their future children, Holden had to stop her. His smile was embarrassed, and there was fear creeping into his face. He told her that there was a problem, because the only thing that they could not have together was children. He explained that he had undergone a vasectomy years earlier, and he had done it at his wife's urging. Ardis had already given him 3 children, and she did not want any more pregnancies. So he had gone through with the procedure, closing the door on fatherhood forever. According to biographer Edward, Hepburn stood looking at him like a hurt and bewildered child. Her eyes searched his face, looking for some sign that he was joking or that there was another way. But there was no sign. Holden would remember the fixed expression in her eyes for the rest of his life. She cried like a hurt child, not like a grown woman ending a relationship, but like someone who had just been told that the thing she wanted most in the world would never be hers. She ended the affair on the spot. It was not about Ardis, or the open marriage, or the tabloids. It was about children. She could forgive his past and his wife and his wandering eye, but she could not forgive that he had made himself unable to give her a family. The biographer later wrote that they were everything to each other, and if Holden had been able to have children, they would have married in an instant. But he could not, and that was the end. What followed was a strange and painful humiliation for both of them. Paramount Pictures staged an evening at Holden's house, where Hepburn would announce her engagement to someone else. The announcement happened inside Holden's marital home, with his wife Ardis present in the same house where the affair had once bloomed. Holden's eyes were reportedly bloodshot that night, and his face showed all the pain he was trying to hide. He was clearly a man who was deeply hurt, and the conversation around him was filled with what one witness called synthetic cordiality. Everyone was being polite, and everyone knew the truth. Holden tried to make Hepburn jealous after she left him, and he came up with a strange plan to do it. He once told her that he had set out around the world with the idea of having a woman in every country he visited. He wanted to prove to himself and to her that he could move on. When he returned to Hollywood, he went straight to Hepburn and told her all about his adventures, expecting her to be wounded or angry. Instead, she reportedly sighed and said, "Oh, Bill," as though he were a naughty boy who had done something silly. His attempt to hurt her had failed completely. Hepburn moved on quickly. She married Mel Ferrer in 1954, just 1 year after the affair with Holden ended. The biographer described it as a rebound marriage, the kind of quick decision people make when they are trying to forget someone else. Ferrer was 37 years old and had been married 3 times before. The press labeled him a manipulative figure who was trying to control her career, but Hepburn saw things differently. She called marriage the completion of everything she had ever wanted and hoped for. She had 1 son with Ferrer, a boy named Sean, who was born in 1960. But getting there was not easy. She suffered a series of miscarriages before Sean finally arrived safely. She was 31 years old when she became a mother, and the wait had been agonizing. She said that having children young was wonderful for some people, but if you wait years for it, the joy is impossible to describe. Years later, after her marriage to Ferrer ended, Hepburn married again. She met an Italian psychiatrist named Andrea Dotti on a Mediterranean cruise aboard a friend's yacht. They married in 1969 when she was 40 years old. and she had a second son named Luca. In the end, she had 2 children, not the 3 or 4 she had dreamed about with Holden. She became a mother, but later than she wanted, and with a different man. Holden, meanwhile, carried the memory of her crying face for the rest of his life. He had told her the truth, and the truth had cost him the woman he called the love of his life. He never stopped loving her, and he never stopped regretting the decision that had made children impossible. That regret followed him into his final years, and the impact it had on both their lives would echo for decades. The devastating impact on Holden's life. William Holden never got over Audrey Hepburn. He married his wife Ardis in 1941, and they stayed together for 30 years, finally divorcing in 1971. But that marriage had been broken long before the papers were signed. The official reasons listed for the divorce were his affairs and his alcoholism, both of which had gotten worse after Hepburn walked away. He lost the woman he called the love of his life, and he spent the rest of his days trying to fill a hole that nothing else could fill. The author who wrote about their relationship said that Holden never fully recovered from losing Hepburn. Biographers are known to study evidence, interviews, and private letters before they come to a conclusion. The conclusion here was simple. Holden carried a wound for the rest of his life, and he never found anyone who could heal it. When Hepburn married Mel Ferrer in 1954, just 1 year after their affair ended, Holden could not handle it. He went on what witnesses described as a world-class drinking spree. The drinking had been a problem before, but after her marriage, it became something much darker. He drank heavily and often, and his condition grew so serious that movie studios started having trouble insuring him for film projects. Holden had other affairs after Hepburn. He was linked to Grace Kelly, the elegant Philadelphia socialite who became Princess of Monaco. He was linked to Shelley Winters, the brash and outspoken actress who won Oscars for dramatic roles. He was also linked to a French actress named Capucine, who was known for her beauty and her grace. None of these relationships lasted, and none of them made him happy. He was searching for something he had already lost, and no amount of new faces could bring it back. In 1980, Holden appeared on The Tonight Show with Johnny Carson. Carson introduced him by saying that Holden was never in a bad motion picture, which was generous but not entirely accurate. What Holden said during the interview was the most honest thing he ever said in public. He told Carson that Audrey was the love of his life. He said he fell in love with her, and she wanted to get married. He described meeting her by saying that before he even met her, he already had a crush on her. After just 1 day together, he felt as if they were old friends, and he became fiercely protective of her. Those words came from a man who was almost 60 years old, speaking about a relationship that had ended over 25 years earlier. He had not forgotten. He had not moved on, and he was still in love with her. 10 years after Sabrina, Paramount Pictures tried to recapture the magic. The studio put Holden and Hepburn together again in a film called Paris When It Sizzles, released in 1964. The movie was meant to be a light-hearted romantic comedy about a screenwriter and his assistant. Instead, it was a disaster. Critics instantly dubbed it Paris When It Fizzles, a cruel pun that stuck because it was accurate. The film failed at the box office, and it failed for the 2 stars personally. The lack of chemistry between Holden and Hepburn was obvious to everyone who watched. Critics wrote that the dialogue was labored and dull, and the plot line was incomprehensible. But the real problem was not the script or the direction. The real problem was that 10 years of regret had been allowed to fester between them. Holden was already deep in his alcoholism by then, and the film did not hide it. He played a character who drank heavily, which meant he was essentially playing himself. The movie tried to sell his drinking as a whimsical 1960s charm, but it did not work. Critics noted that he seemed to have an air of despondency that dragged the entire film down with him. He looked sad, and sadness is not what audiences want from a romantic comedy. For Hepburn, the experience was also painful. She had moved on, or at least she had tried to. But being on set with Holden again after all those years reminded her of what they had lost. She later confirmed to People magazine that the romance with Holden was the greatest love of her life. She had been married twice. She had 2 sons. She had lived a full and meaningful life. But when asked about love, she pointed to Holden. Holden kept trying to replace her, even after the failed movie. He had once said that he set out around the world with the idea of having a woman in every country he visited. But that plan did not work. He kept traveling obsessively, maintaining homes in Palm Springs, California, and Switzerland and Kenya. Johnny Carson once described him by saying that he was usually leaving for someplace or coming back from someplace. He could not sit still. He could not be alone with his thoughts. He had to keep moving, because stopping meant remembering. His final partner was an actress named Stephanie Powers, who was known for her role on the television show Heart to Heart. She shared his love of travel and his passion for Africa, and they stayed together for many years. But they never married. He could not give her that commitment, either because he was still holding on to something from his past or because he no longer believed in marriage at all. Holden died in 1981 at the age of 63. The circumstances surrounding his death were both tragic and somewhat unclear. He was found alone in his Santa Monica apartment after a fall that resulted in a head injury, and it was later noted that he had been drinking. The man who had been one of the biggest stars in Hollywood died by himself, and the world moved on. Hepburn outlived him by 12 years. She died in 1993, surrounded by her family. In her later years, she reflected on what she had learned about men. She said she had learned nothing, except that men were human beings, with all the frailties that women had. Perhaps, she added, they were more vulnerable. She was not talking only about Holden, but she might as well have been. Both of her ex-husbands, Ferrer and Dottie, came to her deathbed in Switzerland during her final hours. They traveled to be near her, along with her 2 sons. One writer described the scene as more powerful and more romantic than any film Hepburn had ever starred in. The men who had loved her, even the ones she had divorced, wanted to say goodbye. Holden was not there, but in a strange way, he was present in every conversation about her life and her loves. She never stopped loving him, and he never stopped loving her. The vasectomy that ended their chance at a future together haunted both of them until their final days, and neither of them ever fully recovered. If you enjoyed this video, don't forget to click on the next video on your screen, like this video, and subscribe to our channel for more updates.